at 11:30.
You're with Clement Manyathela.
702.
So we start our conversation now. In fact, it's the second installment of the series we started last week, where we speak to chief whips of big parties in parliament, the MK party, the DA, the EFF, and the ANC. We started last week with the MK party. We spoke to the MK party's chief whip, Clement Manyathela. Today, we speak to the ANC's chief whip in parliament, Mdumiseni Ntuli. Mdumiseni, thank you so much for making time for us. Good morning.
Good morning, Clement, and good morning to the listeners of 702. And thank you very much for having us on your show.
I want to start off with maybe what happened last week with like the budget postponement, and how involved were you as, Parliament, and these are ANC members of Parliament. Did you see that coming, or were you just as surprised like everyone else?
Well, look, we were not yet involved in the process because the budget is prepared by the Minister of Finance with his team and then taken to Cabinet as a proposal by the Minister of Finance in order for Cabinet colleagues of the Minister to make their own inputs and their own comments, which later on will result in the Cabinet taking a decision in one way or the other. What usually has been the case over years is that Cabinet will agree to the budget proposal by the Minister, as a consequence of which the Minister will then have something to present to Parliament.
That's when you were still in charge, as the ANC.
So as parliamentarian, of course, we were waiting for the budget to be presented. That's the only time we're going to interact with it.
But I saw you called a meeting, I think, with members of Parliament, the ANC members of Parliament. Was it the day after that postponement or so? Or a few days after that? What was that meeting for? Was it with regards to what had happened?
Well, it was the following day. I mean, we usually hold our caucuses every Thursday morning. And so it was a meeting which was going to be taking place. We wanted to insist that the comrades who are serving in Cabinet, who are always with us in caucus, should be reminded that we are going to have a caucus the following day. And it's important that we need all of them in attendance so that the ANC caucus can be fully briefed about what happened and how are we proceeding from where we are.
Yeah, can I ask for just your honest opinion about that decision, though? And I'm asking this for you as a parliamentarian, because there's an argument that you should have allowed the budget to be presented so that what happens is it gets debated, and if there are amendments that need to be made, whether it's amendments to scrap that 2% VAT hike, or you want to add something else, you want to have budget cuts here and there, that process can still unfold. You can still negotiate with other parties while the budget is going through the parliamentary process, the debates and then the vote. What do you think? Was this the best way to go about it? Because even the president in his weekly newsletter yesterday said that was it was unfortunate because it caused a lot of anxiety.
Look, Clement, Parliament has the authority to decide on the budget. Ultimately, to pass it with amendments, to pass it without amendments, to reject it. So it has the full authority on the budget. I think what for me was of serious concern is the time at which the executive was engaging with the budget, which is hardly about half an hour before the start of the sitting. They were still discussing the budget. It's not so much about whether or not they need an absolute consensus as the executive, but at least, as it has been the case in the past, they should have a product which they can all identify with whatever weaknesses that may be in that product, for it to be tabled to Parliament, for Parliament to decide whether to agree or not to agree. So it's my considered view that it was correct that we rather not have the budget tabled in Parliament when there are so much disagreements, within and among members of Cabinet, who, as I say, the Minister presents the budget at their behest. It's not his personal budget. It's a country's budget, which must therefore be an endorsement of the executive of the Republic of South Africa.
Yeah. Now, as the ANC, you no longer enjoy a parliamentary majority. You've done that for about 30 years. How has the ANC caucus adjusted its approach to oversight over the work of government under this GNU?
Well, I think we've adjusted very well. Look, obviously there are things that we used to do in the past which we've got to change. For example, it has never been in our processes as the ANC, except one occasion, as far as I can recall, where we will propose as members of the ANC in Parliament what is called a private member's bill on any question that we may want to resolve. And because the ANC-led government had ministers more or less all the time who are from the ANC, so it was always easy to have all legislation originating primarily from the executive and coming to Parliament. But with the new situation now, we are of the view as the ANC caucus that there may be instances now where the ANC itself will have to initiate a bill through what is called a private member's bill in order to make certain interventions, policy interventions, which may either not be recognized as a priority by a relevant minister, or where the relevant minister may be opposed to it because of his or her own ideological orientation. So in this new reality we find ourselves now, there is a bit of adjustment that the ANC has got to undertake, and I think we're quite capable of doing so. We have already started a process where when we want to adopt certain positions in the portfolio committees are made up of 11 members, and the ANC has only 4. But for us to succeed, to get whatever view we hold adopted by the portfolio committee, we have to engage with other political parties. So I've already directed all our whips in various portfolio committees to ensure that they have an open line and discussion with all political parties, starting with the GNU members, but beyond the GNU, to ensure that whatever views we're advancing in the portfolio committee, somehow get the approval and the support of other political parties within the same portfolio committee.
Yeah, and do the members of Parliament actually attend the sittings? And I remember you had vowed when you got into this position to crack the whip among ANC caucus members there in Parliament. And I suppose part of your duty as the Chief Whip is to ensure that, the ANC members of Parliament attend the plenary sessions and vote on the legislations in the National Assembly. Is there compliance? Because in the past we've seen many of them will come for the big sittings, and they're just like, I'm not going to go for this one because it's not really important, quote unquote, in their view.
Yeah. Well, Clement, since we started, I'm really, really proud and excited with the level of participation and the commitment from the ANC members of Parliament. I can tell you there is one occasion where the sitting was prolonged until very late into the evening, and a few of the ANC members, including some who were in cabinet, decided to go away because it was on a Thursday and they were rushing flights to come back from Cape Town to Johannesburg, to Gauteng for their own activities and engagements the following day. So what we decided to do was to look at who among us has decided to leave without an apology from the Chief Whip. We identified the list of those comrades, and 2 days later I called them into a meeting and to say to them, comrades, it is not only ill discipline, but it also suggests that you don't take your work very seriously, and let alone the African National Congress, when you leave Parliament, when Parliament is in session. And it has only happened once. And of course, comrades had various reasons which they provided. There may be one or two, if I would remember, who simply said, look, I apologize. I took it for granted that we are nearly the end of the sitting. And I have been here for the whole day and I had to rush for the flight. So, but that is one incident which affected 3 or 4% of our members. So the rest of the caucus remained very disciplined, and nobody has had to be pushed behind or to be threatened in one way or the other by myself as the Chief Whip or by the ANC headquarters for failing to adhere to their own responsibilities. So far, it has been a very, very positive involvement and attendance from the ANC members.
Speaking of responsibilities, I want to understand what the responsibility of members of Parliament are in as far as constituency work is concerned, because members of Parliament are expected to undertake those responsibilities, and some of them are almost impossible to get a hold of. And I wonder, whenever they sort of bring about these constituency reports and they submit them to Parliament, what do those entail when you are on the ground, you hear that, but we never get a hold of these people? Is constituency work being done?
Since we started, Clement, I must say that what we do in the ANC, each one of us is allocated a constituency office. And you are required as a member in that office to set up what is called a constituents committee within that office, which is made up of key stakeholders, which you would find in the geographical area where your office is located. So you've got to set up that team, working with two comrades who are employed by the ANC caucus to support you. One as a field worker and the other one to support you as an administrator, sort of in that particular office. So the requirement is that you need to set up the CMC, which is the Constituent Management Committee, and therefore you need to work with the CMC to identify what are the needs of the people where we live, and how do we take them up, channel them to Parliament. Some of them may have to be taken to the local municipality where your constituency office is located, or the provincial government, depending on the nature of the issues that you are picking up in that community. But more and above that, you are required to consistently interact with the sectors of society in that area. Give them a briefing, for instance, about the work of Parliament. There's been a lot of debate recently about the Bella Act, a lot of debate about the Expropriation Act, a lot of debate about the NHI, the relationship between South Africa and America, given the orders that were signed by President Donald Trump. So you've got to interact with the constituents where you come from, so that this population would be fully involved in one way or the other into the business of Parliament, but equally informed about developments which may be happening domestically or beyond our shores, but have a direct impact on our own country. So that is the work of the Member of Parliament.
But are most they doing that work?
Well, remember we were elected last year, and in the Lekhuta early this year, 2-3 weeks ago, we had to do an assessment. Out of the so many members of the ANC, how many of them have not set up their offices? And we discovered that about 75% of our members have already set up their offices, and they've started to interact with the population where they are deployed. There's a few, 30% or so, 25% who have not yet done so. So we have insisted that those must make sure that before the end of February, their offices are properly constituted and they start to interact with the community. I will be able to tell you almost every 3 months, let me say every 3 months, the progress we are making, progress or otherwise, in terms of effectively discharging that responsibility of having an MP dedicating a day or two, at least in the constituents office, interact with the sectors, but equally interact with the community. Not just in events, where a constituents office is going to prepare for a particular event, but an interaction that is intended to inform the population, but equally get the Member of Parliament informed, so that he or she can take up those issues and present them to Parliament.
Is it a justifiable excuse, though, to say after 6 months there's still MPs that haven't set up those constituencies?
It's not.
Because what have they been doing?
It's not, and we insisted in the Lekhuta that look, it's in some instances where we've been changing the location of offices, where we would have had the office, for instance, here in Sentin Drive, and we decide that the rent is too expensive. We need to change the office to a different area. In some cases, there was a delay in the appointment of the field workers. So there are few exceptions where we could justify the reason why these few members have not been able to adhere to their responsibilities. But there are instances where there is no excuse. And that is why we said to them in the caucus, we will not allow this. We can't be sent to Parliament by the ANC to represent our people, and then we don't do our work in the way that is expected by the very same population who have voted us into office.
Okay. It's 22 minutes after 10 o'clock. We're in conversation with Mdumiseni Ntuli, who's the ANC Chief Whip in Parliament. We started this series last week of speaking to Chief Whips of big parties in Parliament. We started with the MK Party. Mdumiseni Ntuli is the Chief Whip for the MK Party. We spoke to him last week Today, we're speaking to the ANC. If you've got any question from Mdumiseni Ntuli about the work of the ANC, members of parliament, why don't you give us a call on 011-883-0702, WhatsApp's on 072-702-1702, 22 after 10.
Hi, I'm Lewis Hamilton. Victory demands everything, but the journey is never solo. My team carves the way, data and innovation are my compass. This is how today's champions are made.
Drive your success and trade like a champion. CFI, a global leading broker now in South Africa. Access over 15,000 instruments, advanced trading tools, 24/7 support, and superior trading services. Visit cfi.trade today. CFI Financial is an authorized financial services provider.
CFI, empower yourself.
Play Powerball and Powerball Plus for 41 million rand in total estimated jackpots this Tuesday for your chance at endless possibilities. Don't miss out. Play Powerball for an estimated 19 million rand and Powerball Plus for an estimated 22 million rand today. Buy your tickets now in store on nationallottery.co.za, the mobile app, cell phone banking, or simply dial *120*7529# for USSD. Panda Pusha Play. Players must be 18 years or older. Play responsibly. Ituba is the proud operator of the National Lottery.
Timber, have you filed your business tax return?
Joe, with My Way Business Insurance, I get My Business Assist, which gives me loads of benefits. They assist in filing my taxes, so no long queues. Plus, I get tender notifications, marketing services, and more to help me elevate my hustle.
They do what?
Yeah, bo. Thanks to My Way, now I have time to focus on the real deal, which is growing my business.
Move to My Way Business Insurance today and get covered to do business your way. Visit myway.co.za for a quote. My Business Assist is a value-added product. My Way is a licensed non-life insurer and FSP. T's and C's apply.
Are you tired of rest? 702.
The Clement Manyathela Show.
Let's walk the talk.
26 minutes after 10 o'clock, Mdumiseni Ntuli is in studio with us. He's the ANC Chief Whip in Parliament. This is part of our series that we're doing over the next couple of weeks. You'll hear from the chief whips of the big parties in Parliament. We did the MK party last week. The ANC today will bring in the DA and the EFF as well over the coming weeks. I want to hear from you. If you've got some questions, some inputs, you can call us or send us a WhatsApp voice note. Lutando, you're calling us from Cape Town. I'm going to ask you to please put on the headphones for us. Lutando, good morning.
Good morning, Clement, and good morning to your guest.
Sure. Go ahead.
Yes, I just want to ask, as members of, as citizens of South Africa, we've been watching something which is almost a soap opera, but between, in particular, the ANC and the DA, how they've been attacking each other, and that came to a head when they couldn't agree on the budget, which led to an unprecedented situation where the budget couldn't be presented by the Minister of Finance. So what we want to know is what makes, if there is hope, is there hope that on the 12th of March, the budget will be agreed upon by Cabinet, given what appears to be ideological and policy and, economic policy differences between the main partners of the GNU, which is the ANC, and the DA. What gives them confidence that this time around they will find each other and agree? Thanks.
All right, Lutando, in Cape Town. I think there was a cabinet meeting yesterday, right? My understanding is that there were other proposals that were presented, but still cabinet ministers couldn't find each other on those proposals. How confident are you? I mean, yes, it's a process outside of your jurisdiction, but the 12th of March is approaching.
Well, Clement, I'm happy that the president convened a special cabinet yesterday. And obviously, I think that would have given these members of cabinet a much more better time than what was the case last week, because there was no pressure for them to finish and quickly come and appear before Parliament. So I'm very, very confident that it should not be difficult. It should not be difficult for a cabinet that understands the situation in the country, the economic situation in the country, and a cabinet that has agreed on the priorities for this administration to then find each other on what is the best model to generate resources which are required to implement the already agreed program of government. So I'm very optimistic. I have not heard from the president or anybody else about how the discussions unfolded yesterday, but I have no reason to believe that this is an impossible matter. which would be completely difficult for this cabinet to reach a consensus.
What options do you think are available as the ANC in Parliament? What options do you think are available for Treasury? Because if we don't have a VAT increase and we don't have personal income tax increases, we don't go with corporate tax increases, and we don't borrow more, you are going to have a reduction in increases. So what's available then as an option? Because anything you think of is going to be a hard pill to swallow.
Look, Clement, where we are, it's inevitable that you are going to have to take a hard decision. And that hard decision may be a combination of the three, which we are mentioning. It may be a combination of this corporate income tax. It can be this personal income tax. I think what is important for the government to look at, which I think they will have a much more better advantage now than they were, which of the options, combined or without being combined, would help us to increase the revenue required, the generation of the revenue required to deal with the challenges we have, without overburdening the poor and the marginalized, who are already going through a very difficult period because of the high cost of living. From the ANC's point of view, we would not be comfortable with anything that increases from where we are, worsening the situation in terms of the high cost of living. And I think that's the reason why those comrades in cabinet decided that no, but if you increase a VAT, probably they were not convinced. It's not convincing. How are you then going to protect the consumers?
But it's your employee there in Treasury who came up with this proposal.
Well, sure. I mean, it's perfectly correct for him to do so because he is faced with a practical situation that he needs more money to finance many commitments of the democratic state. And so when he looked around, he decided on the option of the VAT. And the best thing about, the good thing, Clement, is that that proposal was not a final decision. It was still subjected to the collective and other employees of the ANC, if I were to put it that way, using your own language, who equally reflected on the matter and say, Minister, we don't think this is the best way to go.
I suppose the point I'm trying to make is, for the longest time, COSATU and the SACP would often say, as the ANC, you've deployed quote-unquote neoliberals in Treasury who don't think about the poor. And as the ANC, you claim to be a pro-poor party. And yet the people you put in Treasury, who are going to be in charge of our finances, end up taking decisions that are against the poor.
Clement, the issue about the ANC being a pro-poor party organization is not a claim. It's an objective reality. The reason why the ANC decided on the SLT grant, for instance, was primarily because we needed to do something in order to alleviate the pressure from the people who are unemployed and therefore are subjected to abject poverty. The reason why we're introducing, for instance, an NHI, difficult as it may, and very difficult at the moment to convince some of our sectors in society, which I hope with time we will, is part of this initiative to try and bring some kind of equilibrium between the have and the have-nots in terms of their access to quality healthcare in our country. So the question about the ANC being a pro-poor organization has been settled a long time ago. Okay. The unhappiness from our alliance, our ally partners, has always been that, the ANC is not a socialist organization neither. There are moments where, based on the balance of evidence, you are required to take decisions that, in the opinion of the Communist Party, which is leading a struggle towards socialism, which is not our responsibility, would be at variance with what they are prioritizing in order to achieve their own objectives.
I'll give you an opportunity to expand more on that after the latest in Eyewitness News headlines.
Clement Manyathela.
7:02. Let's walk the talk.
20 minutes before 11 o'clock, we are in conversation with Mdumiseni Ntuli, who is the ANC Chief Whip in Parliament. I want to go to your questions now. 011-883-0702 is the number to dial. The WhatsApp line 0727021702. Mdu, there are some responses, particularly to the chat we had about the budget being postponed. Bambata says, Clement, Mr. Ntuli is now claiming victory for rejecting the budget. It's incorrect, though, and he knows that it was the DA that drew the line on the sand about the VAT increase. Do you think that's fair?
No, Clement. You see, I raised this issue when I had a discussion with one of the people. The sitting arrangement, for instance, in cabinet is of such a nature that you sit according to seniority in terms of the time you've served in cabinet as well as the position you hold. The objective reality, Clement, it's not a fiction. The objective reality is that it was the first 3 or 4 ANC ministers, if I were to put it that way, and the ministers who are members of the ANC, let me put it that way, not ANC ministers who are members of the ANC, who stood up and say, Deputy President, who was chairing the meeting, we are not happy with this budget, and we are convinced that we need more time to have a discussion on this matter. The reason why the DA, which came later, decided to claim victory, if you may define that as victory, is because naturally the DA is in the GNU not only to serve our people but also to promote its own party credibility in society.
And so are you as the ANC?
No, we are not into that game. That is why it's the first time today that as a member of the ANC I'm publicly confirming that in fact what Minister Mackenzie publicized, that is not true that the budget was firstly objected by DA ministers. It started with the ANC.
Well, Mdumiseni Ntuli told us already last week.
But I'm saying from the ANC's point of view, I'm raising this matter for the first time because for us, it was not an important issue about whether the ANC, the comrades who are in cabinet were the first or the last. We now have to deal with this issue because the DA is projecting itself as the party that intervened on behalf of the poor when ANC ministers were assumingly quiet and happy with the budget.
So my assessment is, I mean, as the ANC, you are found wanting here. You're on the back foot. So you're trying to claim victory now. You want to come across as, oh, look at us. We are actually the ones. Yes, our minister is the one who proposed this 2% VAT increase. Oh, but don't worry because we also try to save you from the same problem we actually wanted to start. But let's be honest, Mdu, this is not about cabinet majority. This is about parliamentary majority. Let's say the IFP or anybody else agreed with this budget. If the DA still said, we don't support this budget, there's no way you're going to have this budget voted in parliament.
No.
With the support of the MK party supporting the DA, with the EFF supporting the DA, the numbers don't work in your favor.
Let's deal with that issue. The assumption, that question, Clement, is predicated on the fact that there will always be instances where we can't proceed if the DA does not agree because automatically the opposition parties may not agree. And that's not the case. The reason why on this question of the VAT, the cabinet could not proceed with it. It's not only because the DA was unhappy with it. It's because even the ministers who are members of the ANC were saying, we have not had an opportunity to see this budget. We're not aware that we're increasing VAT. And this is not consistent with the ANC conference as well as the Lekgotla resolution.
It's not true that they were not aware because the Minister of Finance said there have been several meetings that have been had before, even in cabinet, where there were proposals that were put out.
Yes, there were various proposals, but it was not the final proposal, which was going to be taken to Parliament, was only the VAT which was presented to them.
Are you telling me the President found out on the day of budget?
No, I'm not talking about the President. I'm talking about the ministers who raised the objection to the budget.
Yeah. So the President knew that there's going to be a 2% increase.
I don't know how the Minister of Finance interact with the President.
But that would be weird, don't you think?
No. I believe that there would be an interaction that happens between the President and the Minister of Finance.
Which is my point, that the President from the ANC knew that his own Minister of Finance is about to make a decision that is going to affect the poorest of the poor.
Yeah, but the President is a President and he works within a collective. That is why when the collective listen to what... let me put it this way, Clement. The President of the ANC works within the collective. There are views that he may hold as President of the ANC. And when he walks into the National Working Committee, advance those views. I want to start with the ANC, advances those views. The NWC would say, President, we understand where you come from with this particular view, but we have a different suggestion in terms of how we must handle the same question. So I don't want you to create an impression that the President is a dictator, because the President knew the ANC ministers, therefore, had no authority to question a presentation being made by one of their colleagues.
That's interesting because I've got a recollection of the president making a decision and directing, was it the Department of Arts and Culture? What was it, Abel? That flag that had colors in Pretoria.
Yes.
When Nathi Mthethwa was still the Minister of Arts and Culture. He announced a thing that was going to cost over 20 million rand. The president took a decision as a leader that you've got to go reconsider that thing.
Sure.
He didn't need to go sit in the NWC. He didn't need to call a cabinet meeting.
That's correct.
That's because as a president, that's why you are elected and you've got the powers you have.
I agree.
What stops the president of this country when he's sitting down with the finance minister from saying, hold on, Kotongwana, are you telling me that with an economy like ours, where South Africans are so vulnerable, when the poorest of the poor are so struggling, you're going to suggest a 2% VAT increase? What stopped him from saying that, to say, go back to the drawing table?
Look, the president doesn't decide the budget. I wouldn't know what was the conversation, the nature of the conversation between the president and the minister. What I am comfortable about is what I know of, that when the minister came to present the budget to the cabinet ministers, including those who are members of the ANC, said, hold on, you may very well have discussed this matter or raised it with the president. We don't know. But as ministers of this cabinet, we are convinced that taking this direction would not be in the best interest of our country.
Okay.
And I think that does not in any way challenge the authority of the president. The fact that the president himself would have wanted the budget to go through the cabinet to allow that democratic expression of the different views on the matter is in itself.
A few hours before it's supposed to be presented, he wants the expression of views.
Well, that's where the mistake was committed, Clement. The budget should not have been handed a few hours before the sitting of Parliament. That one I agree with you.
Okay. Now, I want you to, because I want to explain this to the listeners. When I talk about parliamentary majority versus cabinet majority, let's use this practical example. If the IFP, the PA, the UDM, all of the parties in the GNU supported this budget, right? All of them.
Yeah.
And the DA didn't support this budget.
Yeah.
You go into Parliament, you present this budget. The DA, the EFF, the MK party, they say no to this budget. It's not passing. I'm looking at the numbers now. I'm not talking politics. I'm looking at the numbers.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I see.
So let's not minimize the DA's role here in saying no to the budget. Whether other ANC members agree to it or not, the point is, had the ANC members and Mackenzie and all of them, had they all agreed and said, we support this budget, but the DA said no, and they were supported by the EFF and the MK because they were going to support the DA in saying no to this budget with a 2% increase, you are not going to pass. So the ANC is holding the key. The DA is holding the key.
No,
in this context.
No. In this context, the role of the opposition in deciding which direction to take would have determined what happens, not the DA. Because what you needed in Parliament is the majority that will either agree with the budget or oppose the budget. Not because the initial opposer or the opposer from Cabinet, let me say the loudest opposer from Cabinet is coming from the Democratic Alliance. The key issue here was where would the main opposition party, for instance, and those that work with them stand on the matter, not where the DA stood.
But we do agree that had all of you had the GNU parties agreed to support this budget, but the DA didn't. In this context, this wasn't going to pass because the DA was going to vote with the EFF and the MK.
If the ANC does not succeed to persuade the MK and the EFF to agree with the budget, sure. Then
but in this context, you were not gonna.
Well, I don't know if we're not going to...
Clement,
the budget was going to be presented. Let me take you to the process. Budget was going to be presented, debated in Parliament, taken to a process where Parliament must then exercise this authority. If the ANC was convinced that this is the way to go, what the ANC was then going to do is to engage with all parties in Parliament, excluding
MK, and say, here's a 2% increase in VAT.
Well, on any issue that is before Parliament, once we are convinced that this is the way to go, we then engage with other political parties.
Okay.
And I want you to understand me properly. I am not saying this to advocate for the correctness of the 2% increase, but I'm addressing the principle that once we take a position on any question, we have a responsibility to engage everybody in Parliament in support of the position we've adopted as the ANC.
Okay, there's someone here who says, hi Clement, please can you ask Mdumiseni, why is it that whenever we're looking at additional revenue, we're thinking on what affects the citizens and not what affects the executive? And I think what they're referring to here is, why is it that you think VAT, you think personal income tax, you think corporate tax? It's never about looking internally. We've got a cabinet that is bloated. We've got a ministerial handbooks with benefits for ministers that could be cut down. Why are we not looking at that?
Well, I don't think that there's a principled position on the ANC that there are certain things you can't look for. And I suppose the reason why the budget is being rediscussed is to reflect on all of those options. Whether those options, by the way, will help us to generate the resources that we need to fund the program of social transformation in the country is a different question altogether. But I don't think the ANC would be hostile to a conversation that says, among the options we should explore is to now reflect on the perks that are given to members of parliament, to the executive, and anybody else that has some whatever kind of benefit accrued to them.
But this conversation, we've been having this for every year, Mdu.
Sure.
Over the last 30 years that you've been in charge as the ANC, this has been suggested that you've got a bloated cabinet. You've got ministers that are driving in fancy cars. You've got premiers and ministers who go with bodyguards. Like, why are we not looking at cutting that? So it can't be that, the ANC now suddenly wants to take seriously this proposal when for the last 30 years it failed to do that. And for the last 30 years, in fact, over the last 20 or so, we've started experiencing these budgetary constraints. Why was it that the ANC never looks within to say, how do we cut our own benefits? Because our ministers they look around, they live like kings, honestly.
I don't know. I'm not a minister.
I'd like to have a home in Joburg and in Cape Town and be driven around. And they don't even know. Do they know how much petrol costs?
I don't know. I've never been a minister, Clement. But
they don't.
I want to comment on the issue. When you say for the last 30 years, that statement suggests that we have had a problem of growing the economy and addressing the problems of society for 30 years. And that is not the case. In the first 10, 15 years of our democracy, the economy was growing, employment was created, obviously not sufficiently, but a great deal of intervention was happening in terms of growing the economy and getting the state to deal with the problem of the social transformation, to address social transformation challenges in the country. Of course, over the past 10, 15 years, the problem emerged, where the economy was going down, starting from 2008, but also because of our own subjective weaknesses as the party, where we were not able to lead the state effectively and efficiently. So then the question arose in the context of the past 10, 15 years. Why have you not intervened to address some of the, what we are calling
why have you not cut the benefits?
I think that's a matter that one should take up with the ANC comrades. I think it's not a difficult discussion to go and raise with our comrades. But as we discuss this budget, there are people in society who are saying, let's also reflect on the issues relating to the benefit of the minister. I don't know. I've never been a minister. I don't know what really are these benefits that if we're to cut, you can generate substantial resources to deal with the challenge.
Well, we need every cent we can get.
I agree.
Even if we cut 1 million, even if we cut just 100,000 rand, we need every cent we have because we have there's a huge budget deficit. We need 60 billion rand just this year alone as additional revenue. And my worry is, how do I take even the ANC seriously if they say, we're going to think seriously about this option now? Because, I can think now at the top of my head. Malusi Gigaba, was he finance minister at the time or in home affairs? He took his wife at the time, to New York. While he's busy attending meetings, wife is going around shopping. Travel there, not on economy class, and I paid for that as a citizen. Already back then, people are saying this ministerial handbook is not working. And I know there have been adjustments that are being made, but there are still so many benefits that are accrued to our ministers. And it just sounds bad that you got a finance minister who proposes a VAT increase and yet doesn't even touch the benefits of the ministers. That's why people are like, are you kidding me? At least, give me 1% VAT, but also cut the benefits of the ministers. Because then you've got the buy-in from the people on the ground who are seeing that you are willing to also swallow the pill. Because all these pills being proposed are going to be swallowed by us as the citizens. They're not going to be swallowed.
So, Clement, I agree with you that there would be people who are thinking like that. And that is why I'm saying I don't think it's a discussion that the ANC should avoid. You've now raised it again with me here. It may have been raised in the past. I have no objection to that. But certainly this is then therefore one of the issues that one will have to place before the ANC leadership to say, there are people who are raising this issue. Is there a way that we can deal with it? If there is, what amount of resources will it generate for us to inject into the fiscus that we all agree is struggling, and we need to raise close to 70 billion rand this year alone, as we are saying.
Yeah, okay. Before we wrap up, I want to ask you quickly about the KZN. You were part of the leadership of the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal. There's a reconfiguration of the KZN leadership that has been announced. Do you think that's going to really strengthen the organization and help figure out what went wrong that led to the poor showing at the polls?
I'm very confident. I mean, looking at the experience and the talent of comrades who are being brought on board,
Jeff
the
Radebe,
seniority
Mike
of them. There are others who are relatively young but quite capable comrades who have served the movement either in the Youth League or in various regional structures of the ANC. So I have no doubt in my mind that leadership, supported by the National Executive Committee, members who are from KwaZulu-Natal, and the NEC in general as an organization, will be able to succeed in their own responsibility.
Yeah. You think Jeff Radebe still has the energy for that?
Well, I think he does. I mean, I don't think that he was not elected in the NEC in the last conference, but I don't think that his vast experience and knowledge of the organization and the province of KwaZulu-Natal, I think that will come very handy in terms of the impact and the influence of the ANC in the province of KwaZulu-Natal. You know, KZN, Clement, it's a province where, because of the way in which it's organized, the kingdom, the Shembe Church, it's a province that relies quite heavily on very recognized, highly respected authority to listen to. So I think if you bring somebody like Comrade Jeff, Comrade Mabuya Kulu, who have served the movement for many years, there are many people who are going to come back and say, but we think the ANC is taking us serious because they are now bringing experience, they are now bringing highly knowledgeable comrades in terms of working in different sectors, even in terms of governance. And we have all the reasons to believe that this leadership is going to pay a much more closer attention to the state of various municipalities in KwaZulu-Natal, especially those that are ANC-led, to ensure that they live up to their own responsibility, given the fact that this leadership is made up, as I'm saying, of comrades who have walked this path and therefore were familiar with how to resolve matters relating to service delivery, working with various sectors of society, and uniting the ANC membership around a commonly agreed program of action.
All right. Mdumiseni Ntuli, thank you so much for making time for us.
Thank you very much, Clement, and thanks to your listeners and all those who had an opportunity to raise questions, and thank you very much for that.
It's 2 minutes before 11.